The state of Illinois and its Historic Preservation Agency welcome you to Springfield's Dana Thomas House, a one-of-a-kind residence designed and built by renowned American architect Frank Lloyd Wright in the period 1902 to 1904.
The agency's suggested donation and admission fee program has been well received by the public, and we thank you for helping to share in the cost of caretaking the sites and offering public tours, programs, and special events.
Fully restored between 1987 and 1990 at a cost of about $5 million, the Dana House has hosted about 300,000 visitors since the restoration, and approximately 1 million persons since the state's purchase of the house in 1981. The intent of the restoration was to make the Dana Thomas residence look as it did in about the year 1910, 6 years after it had been completed.
In order to understand the Springfield project, we need to consider several basic questions. Who was Frank Lloyd Wright, and why was he asked to build a house here in central Illinois? Who was Susan Lawrence Dana, and why did she commission the residence? Thirdly, what is the importance of Mrs. Dana's Springfield house? And finally, what happened to Mrs. Dana and her home, and what happened in the life of the architect?
Frank Lloyd Wright was born in Wisconsin in 1867, grew up near Spring Green, Wisconsin, and apprenticed as an architectural draftsman with architect Joseph Lyman Silsby. Wright eventually rose to the role of chief draftsman for the highly successful Chicago firm of Adler and Sullivan, which built some of the most important buildings of the 1880s and 1890s, such as the St. Louis Wainwright Building, a highly clarified tall building deemed by some as the first truly defined skyscraper.
Wright established his own architectural practice in 1893 after a dispute with his teacher, Louis Sullivan. He began to specialize in home design, such as the simplified Winslow House of 1893 in River Forest, Illinois. It is difficult to believe this important early Wright design, still tied very much to Louis Sullivan, is more than 100 years old.
By 1900, Mr. Wright had built a series of Midwestern prairie houses, low slung and horizontal, having a central fireplace, rows of ribbon windows often made of art glass designs, and an open flowing floor plan where rooms disappear and instead areas flow from one to another.
It was at this critical point in Wright's career that he was approached by 40-year-old Susan Lawrence Dana of Springfield. Although her father, a former mayor of Springfield, and her young husband had died within 6 months of each other between 1900 and early 1901, Susan was determined to change her father's old Italianate house into an entertainment center for extensive parties, receptions, and fundraising benefits.
The old house was totally transformed by Wright. It became the largest residential project thus far in the architect's 10-year-old independent career since leaving Sullivan's office.
Built for some $60,000, including art glass, furniture, and architectural fees, the Springfield project was twice as expensive in its detail and elaboration as the 1902 Ward Willets house at Highland Park, and contained more than 12,000 square feet of finished living spaces and a 4,000 square foot carriage house, now adaptively used as our visitors center.
The residence became a focal center of celebrity life in Springfield. Mrs. Dana entertained regularly, as noted in the front pages of the local papers, and hosted numerous parties and receptions, often co-hosting events with her close friends, Governor and Mrs. Charles Deneen, who lived just down 4th Street at the governor's mansion in the period 1905 to 1913.
Thereafter, she spent the late teens promoting the cause of women's rights and working for the passage of an Illinois Equal Rights Amendment, mentioning after its defeat that, "I am convinced that all men are liars."
By 1930, Susan Dana already had experienced the deaths of her 2 infant children in the 1880s, her first husband Edwin at age 37 in 1900, and her second husband, young Lawrence Jorgendahl, in 1913 at the age of 27. A third marriage to a local family friend, Charles Gehrman, ended in divorce in 1930, and the last close family member, cousin Florence Lawrence, died in 1928.
The 1920s and 30s were spent searching for fulfillment through metaphysical religious activities. The Dana House briefly became the Lawrence Center for Constructive Thinking, where members of the Unity religion met alongside Baha'is and Theosophists, and other practitioners interested in positive thinking and its effect upon health and well-being. Many of these groups also had women ministers.
Susan closed up the Frank Lloyd Wright House and moved over to smaller, more manageable quarters in the White Cottage, just west of the 3rd Street Railroad tracks. She had lived in the main residence for 24 years. In failing health, she took a private room at St. John's Hospital and died there 4 years later in 1946. She was aware the courts had intervened to help settle her affairs, pay outstanding bills, and provide working cash. A large 6-day auction of her things had taken place in July of 1943. The Dana residence was purchased by Charles C. Thomas Publishers in April 1944 and was used caringly for 37 years as corporate offices prior to state ownership.
The Illinois Historic Preservation Agency acquired the house and most of its contents in 1981 for $1 million and opened the building as a state historic site and house museum. It is unique among state properties because it is the only one purchased solely for its architectural merit and building integrity, and for the quality of its world-renowned collection of original art glass, furniture, and decorative arts.
Following the 3-year restoration in 1990, the Dana residence has become one of the premier Wright sites for understanding his development as an architect. This was no modest home for the family of an American businessman. It was one of Wright's largest and most extensive house projects ever, and the number of superb decorative designs still to be seen give testament to this unique project in Wright's long and highly visible and controversial career.
The architect went on to significant world fame, both as a designer of outstanding houses and public buildings. The Frederick Roby House in Chicago of 1907 to 1909. The Guggenheim Museum in New York of 1949 to 1959. And Falling Water at Mill Run, Pennsylvania in 1936. This house recently was voted by architects as the most important building design of the 20th century. It is different from, but related to, the Dana Thomas House. Its comfortable interior expansive rooms are linked by narrow meandering passageways, much like the hallways and the numerous stairwells of the Dana House you will see today on tour. Wright's love of natural materials, wood and stone, are found in both houses, along with his love for organic plants, planter boxes and urns, and rough textured wall surfaces. His early use of water, in the Moon Children fountain in the Dana House, is later echoed in a less subtle way in the siting of the house over the creek at Falling Water.
Frank Lloyd Wright died in 1959 at the age of almost 92, outliving Susan Dana by about 13 years. Their work together in the period 1902 to 1904 comprises one of the most successful collaborations of Wright's early career, with a client interested in entertaining and hosting social events, allowing the young and inventive architect to coordinate the designs of furniture, decorative arts, and architecture. The building stands today as an important reminder that great art flourishes best when a visionary artist and an understanding client can agree on aesthetics, design control, and use.
We welcome you to see and experience the results of their efforts from more than 90 years ago.